My name is Stella. I'm 67 years old, and right now I'm sitting in the country house my late husband Henry and I bought 40 years ago. The afternoon sun streams through the kitchen window, illuminating the rose garden he planted for our 10th anniversary. It's been 3 years since I lost him, but this place still holds every precious memory we made together. The silence here used to comfort me, but today it feels different. 20 minutes ago, my son Marcus called saying he needed to discuss the future of this house. In 35 years, Marcus has never once expressed interest in discussing this property. Something in his voice made my heart skip a beat, and not in a good way. Before I share what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like family might have hidden motives, and don't forget to subscribe because this story about a mother's clever response to her son's shocking request will leave you speechless. Let me take you back to 1982 when Henry and I first laid eyes on this place. We were both 37 newlyweds with big dreams and modest savings. The house sat on 15 acres of rolling Tennessee countryside, complete with a small pond, mature oak trees, and endless possibilities. It needed work, sure, but Henry saw potential where others saw problems. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, wraparound porch, and enough land to raise our future family away from city noise. Marcus came along 2 years later, our miracle baby, after years of trying. This house witnessed his first steps across the hardwood floors Henry refinished by hand. Every summer, we'd plant vegetables together in the garden. Henry expanded year by year. Marcus learned to ride his bicycle on our gravel driveway, caught fireflies in mason jars on warm evenings, and built tree forts in the ancient oaks that bordered our property. Henry was a carpenter by trade, and every weekend became a home improvement project. Together, we installed new windows, updated the plumbing, and converted the old barn into Henry's workshop. Marcus would follow his father around with a toy hammer, helping with repairs that usually took twice as long with his assistance. Those were golden years filled with laughter, scraped knees, and bedtime stories read by lamplight. The house evolved with our family's needs. When Marcus turned 16, Henry taught him to drive on our private roads, patient through stalled engines and jerky starts. Friday nights meant family movie marathons in the living room, sharing bowls of popcorn while rain drummed against the windows. Henry would always choose westerns. I preferred romantic comedies, and Marcus loved anything with explosions. After Marcus left for college, the house felt enormous, but we adapted. Henry started woodworking seriously, crafting furniture pieces he'd give to neighbors and friends. I discovered my love for watercolor painting, setting up an easel near the kitchen window where natural light was perfect. We talked about traveling, maybe selling and buying something smaller, but neither of us could imagine leaving the place where we'd built our entire life. When Henry's diagnosis came 5 years ago, this house became our sanctuary during his illness. Every morning I'd help him to the porch swing where he could watch the sunrise over the pond. Even when walking became difficult, he insisted on checking his tomato plants, leaning heavily on my arm as we made our daily rounds. The house held us through his decline, solid and comforting when everything else felt uncertain. Marcus visited regularly during his father's illness, sometimes bringing his new wife, Priscilla. I could tell she found our rural lifestyle primitive. She'd arrive in designer clothes, completely inappropriate for country living, checking her phone constantly because our internet connection frustrated her. While Marcus and his father discussed sports or politics, Priscilla would wander the house with barely concealed disapproval, commenting on outdated fixtures and wasted space. After Henry passed 3 years ago, everyone expected me to sell immediately. The real estate agent Marcus recommended showed up within a week of the funeral clipboard in hand, ready to discuss market values and listing strategies. But I wasn't ready to let go of 4 decades of memories, and something about rushing into such a major decision felt wrong. This house was my connection to Henry, to the life we'd built together, to the version of Marcus who used to help me bake cookies in the kitchen every Sunday afternoon. Marcus arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, the first time he'd visited in 8 months. Usually he'd call ahead, giving me time to prepare his favorite meal or tidy the guest room he'd grown up in. This visit felt different from the moment his car pulled into the driveway. Instead of his usual warm embrace, he offered a quick, awkward hug before stepping back to survey the property with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom, you look wonderful," he said. though his eyes were already wandering toward the house, scanning the porch railings and roofline like he was conducting an inspection. Really, really good. Country life obviously agrees with you. We sat in the kitchen where I served him coffee and the oatmeal cookies I'd baked that morning, hoping to recapture some of our old closeness. Marcus complimented the cookies, but barely touched them, drumming his fingers against the table in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of his teenage years when he wanted something. "How's work treating you?" I asked, genuinely interested in his recent promotion to senior sales associate at Premier Properties. And Priscilla, is she enjoying her new position at the marketing firm? "Everything's great, Mom. Really great. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to talk with you today." He cleared his throat, a gesture that always preceded difficult conversations. "I've been thinking a lot about your situation here." My situation? The phrase struck me as odd. What situation would that be, honey? Well, you're all alone in this big house. 15 acres is a lot for one person to manage, and you're getting to an age where you know safety becomes a real concern. His voice carried a patronizing tone I'd never heard before. "Don't you think this place might be getting a little overwhelming?" I set down my coffee cup, carefully buying time to process his words. "I've lived here for over 40 years, Marcus. I know every inch of this property. If anything, I feel safer here than I would anywhere else." "But Mom, you're 67. What if something happened? What if you fell and couldn't get help? The nearest hospital is 45 minutes away, and winter's coming. Remember that ice storm 2 years ago when you lost power for 3 days?" He was referring to a weekend when I'd actually enjoyed reading by candlelight and cooking on the wood-burning stove Henry had insisted on keeping. I'd felt self-sufficient and proud, not vulnerable and helpless. But Marcus was painting a picture of an elderly woman barely clinging to independence, and it didn't match my reality at all. "I have neighbors who check on me regularly. The Pattersons are only half a mile down the road, and Martha calls me every evening. I have a generator for power outages, and my cell phone works perfectly well throughout the house." I tried to keep my voice level, but frustration was building. "Besides, I'm not ready to give up the life your father and I built here." Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest but somehow calculating. "I understand this place has sentimental value. Dad loved it here, and so did you. But maybe it's time to think practically about your future. You could sell this place, move closer to town, maybe into one of those nice senior communities with activities and medical facilities nearby." "Senior communities," I repeated the phrase slowly. "Marcus, I'm 67, not 97. I still drive Cook Garden and live independently. I'm not ready for shuffleboard and group exercise classes. I'm not trying to rush you into anything. I just want you to be safe and happy. This house is beautiful, but it's also isolated and expensive to maintain. The property taxes alone must be substantial, and the upkeep on a place this size." He gestured vaguely around the kitchen. "Maybe it would make sense to sell while the market's good and invest the money somewhere that would give you more security." There was something rehearsed about his arguments, as if he'd practiced this conversation. The Marcus I'd raised would have asked about my feelings first, would have wanted to understand my attachment to our family home. This version was presenting a business case complete with logical points about market conditions and financial security. "I'll think about what you've said." I told him which was true. I would definitely be thinking about this conversation, though, probably not in the way he hoped. Change is difficult at my age, especially when it involves leaving behind so many memories. Marcus brightened immediately, as if my willingness to consider his suggestion was equivalent to agreement. "That's all I'm asking, Mom. Just think it through objectively. I love you, and I want what's best for you." He left shortly afterward, promising to call in a few days to continue our discussion. I watched his car disappear down the driveway, feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Something about the entire conversation felt wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what bothered me most. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus called almost daily. Each conversation followed the same pattern: casual inquiry about my health and activities, followed by gentle pressure about reconsidering my living situation. He'd found articles about seniors aging in place, safely researched retirement communities in nearby towns, and even located a financial advisor who specialized in helping older adults manage housing transitions. His persistence was exhausting. I'd lived peacefully in this house for 3 years since Henry's death, finding comfort in familiar routines and cherished memories. Suddenly, Marcus was presenting my life as a problem that needed solving, my independence as a liability that required management. The phone calls intensified during the third week. Marcus had been doing research on local real estate values and thought I should at least get a professional appraisal. He'd spoken with several agents who assured him that rural properties like ours were hot commodities in the current market. The language he used became increasingly focused on financial opportunities and investment strategies, less concerned with my emotional attachment to our family home. Then came the visit that changed everything. Marcus arrived on a Saturday morning, this time accompanied by Priscilla. They'd coordinated their arrival, he explained, because Priscilla wanted to better understand the situation and offer her perspective as someone younger who could see things objectively. Priscilla entered my house like she was inspecting it for code violations. She walked through each room with undisguised criticism, commenting on dated fixtures and inefficient layouts. The hardwood floors Henry had refinished with his own hands were worn and scratched. The kitchen we'd renovated piece by piece over 20 years was hopelessly outdated. The living room where we'd hosted countless family gatherings was cramped and dark. "Mrs. Coleman, I hope you don't mind me being direct," Priscilla said, settling into Henry's favorite armchair without invitation. "Marcus is worried sick about you living out here alone. As someone who works in marketing, I see a lot of demographic data about aging populations. The statistics about seniors living in isolated rural areas are frankly terrifying." I noticed she'd chosen to sit in Henry's chair specifically, almost as if she was claiming authority in my own home. "What statistics would those be, Priscilla? Fall-related injuries delayed emergency response times, social isolation leading to cognitive decline. Plus, the financial burden of maintaining a property this size on a fixed income must be enormous." She gestured around the room dismissively. "Marcus told me your property taxes alone are over $4,000 annually." Marcus shifted uncomfortably at her blunt approach, but he didn't contradict her. "Mom, we're not trying to pressure you. We just want you to have all the information before making a decision about your future." "What decision?" I asked. "I haven't indicated I'm planning to make any changes to my living situation." Priscilla and Marcus exchanged a look I wasn't supposed to notice. "Well," Priscilla continued, "Marcus and I have been discussing the practical aspects of your situation, and we think we might have found a solution that could benefit everyone." This was the moment when their true intentions began to surface. Priscilla launched into an enthusiastic description of a gorgeous Porsche Cayenne she'd discovered at a luxury dealership in Nashville. The vehicle was absolutely perfect for her new position at the marketing firm, projecting exactly the right image for client meetings and business presentations. Marcus attempted damage control, emphasizing that they were only exploring options, but Priscilla was too excited to be subtle. The SUV cost $85,000, which seemed like a fortune to me, but was apparently very reasonable for a vehicle of that caliber. She had already spoken with the sales manager about financing options and trade-in values for their current cars. "The thing is," Priscilla continued, seemingly oblivious to Marcus's warning glances, "we're just a bit short on the down payment to get the financing terms we want. But Marcus calculated that your house should sell for at least that amount, probably more in today's market." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. They weren't concerned about my safety or well-being. They wanted me to sell my home so they could afford a luxury vehicle for Priscilla's career advancement. The senior community suggestions and safety concerns were manipulation tactics designed to pressure me into financing their lifestyle upgrade. Marcus tried to backpedal. "Mom, it's not like that. We genuinely believe you'd be happier and safer in a more appropriate living situation. The fact that selling would help us with some financial goals is just a bonus." But Priscilla couldn't stop herself. "You're too old to enjoy this place anyway. It's just going to waste. You barely use half the rooms, and the land just sits here growing weeds. At least if we had the car, it would be put to good use every day." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Too old to enjoy my own home. The house where I'd raised their child, nursed my husband through his final illness, and planned to spend my remaining years was going to waste, in their opinion. They saw my attachment to 40 years of memories as an obstacle to their material desires. Marcus seemed to realize that Priscilla had revealed too much. "Mom, I think what Priscilla means is that you deserve to enjoy your retirement instead of being tied down to property maintenance and isolation. No, Marcus, I think Priscilla said exactly what she meant. I stood up, suddenly needing distance from both of them. You want me to sell the home your father and I built together so you can buy your wife a luxury car? It's not that simple, Marcus protested, but his denial lacked conviction. I looked at my son, searching for traces of the boy who used to help me plant flowers and collect eggs from our chickens. Instead, I saw a man who viewed his mother as a resource to be liquidated for his convenience. The transformation was heartbreaking and infuriating in equal measure. I'll consider everything you've said, I told them calmly. Thank you both for sharing your perspectives so honestly. They left with obvious satisfaction, believing they'd successfully presented their case. Priscilla was already scrolling through her phone, probably looking at pictures of the car she expected me to finance. Marcus hugged me goodbye with renewed warmth, confident that he'd soon be solving his wife's transportation needs with the proceeds from my home sale. I watched them drive away in their perfectly adequate Honda Accord, already planning the luxury upgrade they expected me to fund. For the first time since Henry's death, I felt truly alone, not because I lived by myself, but because my own son had revealed that he saw me as nothing more than a financial opportunity. That night, I sat in Henry's chair, the same one Priscilla had claimed so casually, and allowed myself to fully process what had happened. The magnitude of Marcus's betrayal was stunning. The son I'd raised to value family honesty and compassion had conspired with his wife to manipulate me into sacrificing my home for their material gain. I remembered something Henry used to say during difficult times: Stella, never let anyone take advantage of your kindness, even family. Especially family. At the time, I thought he was being unnecessarily cynical. Now, I understood he was preparing me for exactly this situation. Sleep eluded me completely. I wandered through each room of the house, seeing it through new eyes. In the living room, family photos documented decades of holidays, birthdays, and ordinary moments that had shaped our lives. The kitchen still bore scuff marks from Marcus's childhood bicycle accidents and height measurements Henry had penciled beside the doorframe. Every corner held memories that Marcus was apparently willing to sacrifice for automotive leather and premium sound systems. By morning, I'd made my decision. If Marcus wanted to treat this as a business transaction, I would approach it with business-like objectivity. But the outcome would be very different from what he expected. My first call was to my neighbor, Martha Patterson, who worked as a real estate appraiser. Martha, I need a favor. Could you give me an honest assessment of what my house might be worth in today's market? Martha was delighted to help, arriving within an hour with her measuring tools and market analysis software. We spent the morning touring every room while she documented square footage, recent improvements, and comparable sales in the area. Her findings surprised me. My property was worth significantly more than Marcus had estimated, closer to $340,000, rather than the $85,000 he'd mentioned. Stella, you're sitting on quite an asset here, Martha explained. Rural properties with this much land and character are incredibly desirable right now. City folks want to escape urban stress, and your place offers privacy, natural beauty, and solid construction. You could probably get asking price within 30 days if you decided to sell. Next, I called Sarah Mitchell, a friend from church who practiced real estate law. Sarah had handled Henry's estate planning and knew our family situation well. When I explained Marcus's proposal and Priscilla's comments about my age, Sarah's reaction was immediate and furious. Stella, what they're doing is unconscionable. You're completely competent and independent. There's nothing wrong with choosing to age in place, especially when you have the resources to maintain your home properly. Sarah paused, considering options. Have you thought about alternative ways to handle your estate planning? That conversation led to the most satisfying research I'd done in years. Sarah introduced me to the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary, a nonprofit organization dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating native wildlife. Henry had always loved animals, contributing regularly to similar causes throughout our marriage. The sanctuary operated on donated land throughout Tennessee, providing permanent homes for injured wildlife that couldn't be released back into their natural habitats. The sanctuary's director, a passionate woman named Dr. Jennifer Walsh, explained how land donations worked. Families could transfer property ownership to the organization while retaining lifetime occupancy rights, creating a legacy gift that provided immediate tax benefits and ongoing purpose. The arrangement would allow me to live in my home for the rest of my life while ensuring the land would be protected and used for wildlife conservation after my death. Your property would be perfect for our rehabilitation programs, Dr. Walsh explained during her visit the following week. The pond could support waterfowl recovery, and your open meadows would be ideal for releasing hawks and owls back to the wild. We'd maintain the house exactly as it is, respecting both the structure and your occupancy rights. The financial arrangements were surprisingly favorable. The sanctuary could purchase the property for $320,000, providing me with a substantial charitable tax deduction while guaranteeing my right to remain in the house until my death. They would assume responsibility for property taxes and major maintenance while I would continue handling utilities and day-to-day upkeep. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked quietly with Sarah to finalize the legal paperwork. Marcus called several times, growing increasingly impatient about my decision timeline. He mentioned that Priscilla had already spoken with the Porsche dealership about financing options and needed to know my timeline for listing the house. "I'm working through all the details, honey," I assured him. "These are big decisions that require careful consideration." "I understand, Mom, but the car market moves pretty fast. We don't want to lose this opportunity because we waited too long to act." His tone carried an edge of frustration I'd never heard before. Priscilla's really excited about this chance to advance her career. I found it interesting that he framed their luxury car purchase as a career advancement opportunity, rather than a personal indulgence, but I didn't challenge his rationalization, not yet. 3 weeks after their initial visit, all paperwork was complete. The sanctuary's purchase agreement was signed, recorded, and legally binding. My home now belonged to an organization that would protect it forever while I retained the right to live here for the remainder of my life. The money would fund wildlife rehabilitation programs and habitat conservation throughout the region. For the first time since Henry's death, I felt completely at peace with a major decision. I'd honored his memory, protected our home, and ensured that Marcus would learn an important lesson about assuming his mother's vulnerability. Marcus called on a Thursday morning announcing that he and Priscilla would be arriving that afternoon with important paperwork for me to review. His tone was confident, almost celebratory, as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. "Mom, I've found the perfect real estate agent. Jennifer Thompson specializes in rural properties and thinks she can get you top dollar for the house. All you need to do is sign the listing agreement and we can have this place on the market by next week." "That's very thoughtful of you, Marcus," I replied calmly. "I look forward to discussing the situation with both of you." They arrived at 2 o'clock, Priscilla wearing a new outfit I suspected was purchased in anticipation of her luxury car acquisition. She carried a leather portfolio that probably contained contracts and market analyses, while Marcus brought a bouquet of flowers, my favorite daisies, which felt like manipulation disguised as affection. "Mom, you look fantastic," Marcus said, embracing me with enthusiasm I hadn't experienced in months. "Ready to start the next chapter of your life." We gathered in the living room where Marcus spread real estate documents across the coffee table Henry had built from reclaimed barnwood. Listing agreements, market comparisons, and projected sale timelines covered the surface like a business presentation. Priscilla took notes on her phone occasionally, interjecting with questions about square footage and included appliances. "The agent thinks we can list for $290,000 and expect offers within 2 weeks, Marcus explained. "That should be more than enough to get you settled somewhere more appropriate and help us with our down payment." I noticed he'd reduced the estimated sale price from Martha's appraisal, probably to ensure maximum proceeds for their personal use. The casualness with which he discussed my displacement was breathtaking in its insensitivity. "Actually, I have some news for both of you," I said, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate care. "I've already sold the house." The silence that followed was profound. Marcus's pen stopped moving across the contracts, and Priscilla looked up from her phone with confused irritation. They both stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, sold?" Marcus asked slowly. "I mean, the property has been purchased, the sale is complete, and new ownership has been legally recorded." I kept my voice matter-of-fact, as if discussing grocery purchases rather than their shattered expectations. Priscilla found her voice first. "You can't just sell without telling us. We've been planning this for weeks. Who did you sell to, and for how much?" "I sold to the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary for $320,000. The transaction was completed 3 weeks ago, the same day you first came here to discuss your car purchase. Marcus's face cycled through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. You sold our family home to strangers without discussing it with me first, Mom. This is insane. Actually, they're not strangers. They're a reputable conservation organization that will use the land for wildlife rehabilitation programs. Your father always supported similar causes, so I knew he'd approve of my decision. Priscilla jumped to her feet, her careful composure completely abandoned. What about our car? We already put a deposit down based on your promise to sell. You've completely screwed up our financial planning. I never promised to sell, Priscilla. I promised to consider your suggestion, which I did very carefully before making my decision. Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on a threatening tone I'd never heard before. This is ridiculous. You're not thinking clearly. I'll contest this sale. You're obviously not mentally competent to make these kinds of decisions without family consultation. I reached into my purse and withdrew 2 documents. The first is a psychological evaluation I had done last week confirming my complete mental competency. The second is a letter from my attorney explaining that the sale was conducted according to all legal requirements and is completely binding. Your attorney, Marcus repeated. Since when do you have an attorney? Since I realized I needed protection from family members who might try to take advantage of my supposed vulnerability. Priscilla had been scrolling frantically through her phone during our exchange. Marcus, the dealership says our financing approval expires next Friday. If we can't come up with the down payment, we lose the car and our deposit. Then figure something else out, I suggested. Perhaps you could buy a vehicle that fits within your actual budget instead of expecting me to subsidize your lifestyle choices. Marcus stood abruptly pacing toward the window that overlooked the pond where he'd learned to swim as a child. This money should stay in the family. That house represents 40 years of our lives, and you've just given it away to strangers. No, Marcus. That house represents 40 years of your father's and my life. You left home 20 years ago and visited maybe twice a year until you decided you wanted my money. This property was never yours to claim. The conversation devolved rapidly from there. Priscilla accused me of being selfish and vindictive, while Marcus threatened legal action he couldn't possibly afford. They had operated under the assumption that my age automatically granted them decision-making authority over my assets, and the reality of my independence challenged their fundamental worldview. You'll regret this, Marcus said as they gathered their useless paperwork. When you're old and broke and need our help, remember this moment. Marcus, I'm already old according to your wife, and I'm certainly not broke after making the largest financial transaction of my life. If I need help in the future, I'll hire professionals, rather than depending on family members who see me as a source of funding. They left in a fury of slammed doors and screeching tires, leaving me alone in the house that now belonged to an organization dedicated to healing and protecting defenseless creatures. The irony wasn't lost on me. The following months passed with surprising tranquility. Marcus made no attempt to contact me, apparently hoping that silence would eventually bring me crawling back with apologies and financial assistance. His strategy failed because I'd never been happier or more purposeful. My relationship with the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary began immediately and became the most fulfilling work of my retirement. Dr. Walsh invited me to volunteer with their educational programs teaching local school children about wildlife conservation and habitat protection. The sanctuary's staff were passionate, knowledgeable people who respected my experience and valued my contributions. The property transformation was remarkable. Within 6 weeks, the sanctuary had installed professional-grade flight enclosures for injured birds of prey, converted our old barn into a veterinary treatment facility, and established rehabilitation pens for various species throughout the wooded areas of our land. The pond became home to rescued waterfowl, recovering from oil spills and fishing line injuries. Every morning, I would walk the trails with Dr. Walsh or other staff members, learning about the animals in our care and the stories of how they'd arrived at the sanctuary. A great horned owl named Athena had been electrocuted by power lines and could never fly again, but she became our most effective educational ambassador, teaching children about coexistence with predators. A family of raccoons orphaned when their mother was killed by traffic learned survival skills in our wooded areas before being released back to the wild. The work provided purpose I'd never experienced before. Instead of rattling around in an empty house dwelling on memories and isolation, I spent my days contributing to something larger than myself. Henry would have been so proud to see our land being used to heal injured creatures and educate future conservationists. 3 months after the sale, I received a letter from Marcus. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, his familiar handwriting triggering a mixture of hope and apprehension. Inside, I found a brief note acknowledging that he and Priscilla had divorced after their financial disagreements escalated into irreconcilable differences. "Mom," the letter read, "I know I made terrible mistakes. Priscilla and I got caught up in trying to keep up with people who had more money than us, and I lost sight of what really mattered. I'm sorry for treating you like a bank account instead of my mother. If you're willing, I'd like to try to rebuild our relationship on better terms." The letter was a start, but words were easy. I needed to see evidence of genuine change before I could trust him again. I wrote back inviting him to visit the sanctuary and see what his father's and my home had become. If he truly understood the value of what we'd built together, he would appreciate the legacy we were creating. Marcus came alone the following Saturday, driving his old Honda instead of the luxury vehicle he'd once demanded I finance. He walked through the property, with obvious amazement watching rehabilitation specialists work with injured animals and learning about the education programs I'd helped develop. "Mom, this is incredible," he said as we sat on the porch where Henry used to watch sunrises. "Dad always said you were the smartest woman he'd ever met, but I don't think I really understood what he meant until now. Your father taught me that the best way to honor a life well lived is to ensure it continues benefiting others after we're gone. This land will help wildlife for generations long after I'm no longer here to tend it." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, watching a red-tailed hawk exercise in one of the flight enclosures. "I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I never considered what you actually wanted. I'm sorry for being selfish and disrespectful." Apologies are a good start, but rebuilding trust takes time and consistent actions. If you're serious about repairing our relationship, you'll need to prove that you value me as your mother, not as a source of financial support. He nodded, seeming to understand the depth of work required to heal the damage he'd caused. "Can I volunteer here sometimes? I'd like to learn about what you're doing and maybe contribute something positive instead of just taking." That conversation marked the beginning of Marcus's genuine transformation. He began visiting monthly volunteering with habitat maintenance and learning about wildlife rehabilitation. Slowly, tentatively, we started rebuilding the connection that had been damaged by his misguided priorities and his ex-wife's manipulations. 1 year after selling the house, I was working in the sanctuary's education center when Martha Patterson called with urgent news. "Stella, you need to know that someone was seen breaking into your house last night. I called the police, but I thought you should hear this directly." My house. After a full year, Martha still thought of the property as mine, which was touching but no longer accurate. Did the police catch whoever it was? That's the strange part. When they arrived, they found Marcus inside, going through closets and packing items into boxes. He claimed he was collecting family belongings with your permission, but something about the whole situation felt wrong. I hung up and immediately called the sanctuary's security service, Dr. Walsh had installed a comprehensive alarm system to protect the valuable rehabilitation equipment, and every building on the property was monitored 24 hours a day. If Marcus had triggered the sensors, we would have video evidence of his activities. Tom Bradley, the sanctuary's head of security, met me at the house within an hour. Tom was a retired wildlife officer who'd joined the organization after his wife passed away, and over the months, we'd developed a close friendship based on shared loss and renewed purpose. He was patient, kind, and respectful in ways that made me feel valued rather than protected. "The alarms were definitely triggered around midnight," Tom explained, reviewing footage on his laptop. "Someone disabled the external sensors, but the internal cameras captured everything." We watched Marcus move systematically through the house, packing items that had belonged to Henry Tools from the workshop, family photographs, and even some of my personal jewelry that had been wedding gifts. He'd brought his own boxes and packing materials, suggesting the break-in had been planned carefully rather than executed on impulse. "He knew exactly where to find everything," Tom observed. "This wasn't random theft. He was targeting specific items he felt he was entitled to take." The most disturbing part was watching Marcus move through rooms where we'd shared so many family memories, treating our belongings like merchandise to be claimed and sold. The boy who'd once helped Henry organize those same tools now saw them only as assets to be converted into cash. At 11:30, car headlights appeared in the driveway. Tom and I watched as Priscilla emerged from a rental car, apparently serving as the getaway driver for their midnight expedition. Even after their divorce, they'd coordinated this theft together, united by their shared sense of entitlement to my family's possessions. "Should we call the police now?" Tom asked. "Not yet. I want to handle this personally first." I had learned a lot about standing up for myself over the past year, and this situation required a direct response rather than legal intervention. We drove to the house, immediately arriving just as Marcus emerged with the last box of stolen items. The look on his face when our headlights illuminated him in the driveway was a mixture of guilt, defiance, and panic. Priscilla remained in the car, probably hoping to avoid direct confrontation with me. "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly as Tom and I approached the house. "I wasn't expecting visitors tonight." "Mom!" He set down the box, clearly trying to formulate an explanation that would minimize his wrongdoing. "I was just collecting some of Dad's things, items that should stay in the family. By breaking into a house that no longer belongs to our family in the middle of the night, without permission from the current owners." I gestured toward Tom, whose presence clearly intimidated Marcus. "I believe that's called burglary." Marcus glanced nervously at Tom, then back at me. "These things belong to Dad. They shouldn't be sitting here unused when his family could benefit from them. Your father's possessions were included in the property sale just like everything else. They now belong to the Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary, and removing them without authorization is theft." My voice remained calm, but inside I was furious at his continued sense of entitlement. Priscilla finally emerged from the car, apparently deciding that Marcus needed backup. "Mrs. Coleman, you're being completely unreasonable. Those tools and photographs have sentimental value for Marcus. You can't just give away family heirlooms to strangers." "I can do whatever I choose with my own possessions, Priscilla, and you have no standing to comment on my decisions since you're no longer part of this family and you're currently participating in a criminal act on my former property." Tom stepped forward with quiet authority. "I'm Tom Bradley, head of security for Wild Heart Animal Sanctuary. This property is under 24-hour surveillance, and we have complete video documentation of your activities tonight. I need you both to return every item you've taken, and then you need to leave immediately." Marcus's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is ridiculous. I'm her son. I have more right to these things than some random organization." "No, Marcus, you don't." I was done being patient with his refusal to accept reality. "You lost any claim to consideration when you tried to manipulate me into selling my home to finance your luxury purchases. You forfeited the right to family heirlooms when you treated your mother like a business transaction rather than a human being." The unpacking process was humiliating for Marcus and educational for me. Watching him reluctantly return stolen items revealed the depth of his financial desperation and his continued inability to accept responsibility for his choices. He'd taken Henry's entire tool collection, probably planning to sell it along with photograph albums that documented our family history. "I need money, Mom." His admission came as he handed over the last box of stolen goods. The divorce was expensive, and I made some bad financial decisions trying to keep up with Priscilla's spending. I thought Dad's tools might be worth something. "Then you should have asked me directly instead of breaking into my former home like a common thief." I felt sad for him, but no longer surprised by his poor judgment. "If you'd approached me honestly about your financial problems, we might have been able to work something out. But stealing from a wildlife sanctuary crosses a line I can't overlook." Priscilla had remained silent during the confrontation, but now she exploded with frustration. "This whole situation is insane. You gave away $300,000 to animals while your own family struggles financially. What kind of mother does that?" "The kind of mother who refuses to enable her adult son's irresponsible lifestyle choices," I replied. "Marcus created his financial problems through his own decisions. My money was never his solution to those problems." Tom handled the final details with professional efficiency. He documented the returned items, took photographs for the security files, and informed Marcus that any future unauthorized presence on sanctuary property would result in immediate arrest and prosecution. The organization couldn't afford to have volunteers or animals threatened by family drama. As they prepared to leave, Marcus made one final attempt at emotional manipulation. "Mom, I'm your only child. When you die, everything you own should go to me anyway. Why are you making this so complicated?" Because Marcus' inheritance is earned through love, respect, and relationship over time. It's not an automatic entitlement based on biology alone. I looked at my son, seeing both the boy I'd raised and the man he'd chosen to become. "If you want to be part of my life going forward, you'll need to prove that you value me as a person, not just as a source of future financial inheritance." They drove away in defeat, leaving Tom and me standing in the driveway of the house that now served a purpose far greater than either Marcus or Priscilla could comprehend. The sanctuary's mission to heal and protect vulnerable creatures had become my own mission to heal from family betrayal and protect my independence from those who would exploit it. That confrontation with Marcus proved to be the turning point in our relationship, though not in the way I initially expected. Instead of driving him further away, the consequences of his actions seemed to wake him up to the reality of what he'd lost through his selfishness and greed. 2 weeks after the break-in incident, Marcus sent a formal letter of apology to Dr. Walsh and the Sanctuary Board, accepting full responsibility for his actions and requesting permission to make restitution through volunteer work. The letter was well-written, humble, and specific about the changes he wanted to make in his life. Dr. Walsh shared the letter with me before responding, wanting to ensure that Marcus's presence wouldn't create ongoing stress or conflict for my volunteer work. "Stella, this decision has to be entirely yours. The sanctuary can function perfectly well without his involvement, but if you think there's genuine hope for rebuilding your relationship, we're willing to give him a chance." I thought carefully about Marcus's request. The son I'd raised had been generous, hardworking, and compassionate before marriage to Priscilla had distorted his priorities. Perhaps removing her influence and facing real consequences for his choices had reminded him of the values Henry and I had tried to instill during his childhood. "I'd like to see if he's serious about change," I told Dr. Walsh. "But any volunteer work he does should be genuine contribution to the sanctuary's mission, not just an attempt to win back my approval." Marcus began working at the sanctuary the following month, starting with the most basic maintenance tasks: cleaning animal enclosures, repairing fencing, and assisting with grounds maintenance. Dr. Walsh paired him with experienced volunteers who could teach him about wildlife rehabilitation while evaluating his commitment and attitude. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Marcus threw himself into the physical labor with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since his teenage years. He learned to prepare specialized diets for different species, helped construct new habitat enclosures, and even assisted with the rescue of injured animals brought to the sanctuary by concerned citizens. More importantly, he began to understand the significance of the work we were doing. During one of our monthly dinners together, he described helping release a rehabilitated red-tailed hawk back to the wild after months of recovery from a wing injury. Mom watching that bird fly away was incredible. Knowing that Dad's workshop tools helped build the enclosure where she healed and that this land gave her a safe place to recover it made me understand what you meant about creating a lasting legacy. Our relationship rebuilt slowly based on shared work rather than shared history. Marcus proved his commitment through consistent actions over time, volunteering every weekend and taking on increasingly responsible roles within the sanctuary's operations. He never again mentioned money or inheritance, focusing instead on contributing to something larger than his immediate desires. 6 months after his volunteer work began, Tom Bradley and I announced our engagement. Tom had become my closest friend and strongest supporter during the difficult months of family conflict, and our shared commitment to the sanctuary had grown into deep, personal affection. At 67 and 65 respectively, we were both surprised to find love again, but grateful for the unexpected gift of companionship in our later years. Marcus's reaction to our engagement was the final test of his changed character. Instead of calculating how my remarriage might affect his inheritance prospects, he expressed genuine happiness for my newfound joy and offered to help plan the wedding ceremony. "Mom, you deserve to be happy. Tom's a good man, and it's obvious that he loves and respects you the way Dad would have wanted." Marcus hugged me with real warmth, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was embracing my actual son rather than a stranger wearing his face. Tom and I were married in a simple ceremony on the sanctuary grounds, surrounded by volunteers, staff members, and the sounds of recovering wildlife. Marcus walked me down the aisle, having earned back the right to play a significant role in my life through months of consistent, selfless actions. The past 2 years have brought more fulfillment and purpose than I experienced during the lonely years after Henry's death. The sanctuary has rescued and rehabilitated hundreds of injured animals, educated thousands of children about conservation, and protected 15 acres of habitat for future generations. My marriage to Tom has provided companionship, adventure, and the kind of mature love that develops between people who've learned to value character over convenience. Marcus has become one of the sanctuary's most dedicated volunteers, eventually accepting a paid position as facilities manager when our previous manager retired. His transformation from selfish, manipulative son to committed conservationist and supportive family member proves that people can change when they face real consequences and choose growth over entitlement. Last month, Marcus brought his new girlfriend Sarah to meet Tom and me. Sarah is a veterinary technician who volunteers with several animal rescue organizations, and her genuine passion for wildlife rehabilitation matches Marcus's developed commitment to the cause. Watching them work together to prepare food for injured owls, I see the kind of partnership based on shared values that Henry and I enjoyed for 40 years. The irony of our family's healing isn't lost on me. Marcus demanded that I sell our family home to finance his material desires, but the sale ultimately saved both the land and our relationship. By refusing to enable his selfishness and instead creating something meaningful from our family legacy, I forced him to confront his values and choose the kind of man he wanted to become. Sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching someone that love can't be bought or sold, that relationships require investment of time and attention rather than expectation of financial benefit. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, but he did learn it, and our bond is now stronger than it's been since his childhood. When you stand up for yourself, you're not just protecting your own dignity, you're showing others how they deserve to be treated too. The wildlife that recovers on this land, the children who learn about conservation in our education programs, and even my son, who rediscovered his better nature through service to others, all benefit because I refuse to let anyone take advantage of my supposed vulnerability. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and standing up for what you knew was right? Share your story in the comments below and let me know how you handled the situation. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story reminded you that it's never too late to set boundaries with people who take you for granted, and subscribe for more real stories about finding strength when family relationships become complicated. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth is never determined by what others think they can take from you.